Good morning. It is a delight to be with you all in worship this morning, from the folks that are helping lead worship and those who welcomed me when I arrived to the beautiful music we shared this morning. It is indeed a wonderful day to worship God. Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be pleasing to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Since one of the focuses of my new role in the Christian church in Indiana is coordinating camps, I have spent quite a bit of time this summer, in the spring and the summer, with the camp curriculum. Through the months of preparation and planning, and through the 5 weeks and 11 camps, I've spent a lot of time with this curriculum. The title of this year's theme was What's in a Name? Which, if you recall back to probably 9th grade or so, you'll remember that famous line from William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And of course, the bard wrote those words saying that names don't matter. But I think I would argue that point with Mr. Shakespeare, which I feel like I can do because I taught literature for several years before going to seminary, and I taught Romeo and Juliet a time or two. So I think I'll argue with Shakespeare and say that I think names really do matter. And what our campers and counselors and directors had the opportunity to explore this summer at camp was that the Bible is full of occasions where names matter. Sometimes names are given by angelic decree. Sometimes names change because of a perspective-altering experience. And so this morning I want to explore with you one particular scripture that has to do with the significance of names, but the names are not often our focus. When our scripture from the book of Exodus is read, it is most often referred to as the burning bush. But this morning, let's consider what it can tell us about the importance of names. Let us hear now Exodus 3, verses 1 through 15. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." He said further, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'The Lord your God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations.'" Thanks be to God. In 2014, I had the opportunity to travel to the Democratic Republic of Congo with the Indiana Region's partnership with the disciples in the Mbandaka district of that country. During our 2-week visit with our partners there, we visited churches and other ministries of the disciples in Congo. On one particular day, we visited a nutrition center that was supported by churches right here in Indiana. Nutrition is a really big issue in Congo. Many children there are severely malnourished because of a lack of access to the kinds of foods that children need to be nourished and thriving. So each day, children and their mothers would come to this center for a robust meal and education on nutrition. Our group was prepared for this to be a difficult and discouraging day. We arrived to find a room full of bright and smiling faces staring up at us. As we sat and listened to the director of the nutrition center tell us all about their work, I noticed this little boy eyeing me. And before I knew it, he was standing right next to my chair, smiling brightly at me. He spoke Lingala, the indigenous language of Congo, of that area of Congo, and I don't. So we communicated through silly faces and laughter. He was enthralled by my camera, and he wanted to take 1,000,000 pictures. I sang "If You're Happy and You Know It," and even though he didn't know the words I was singing, he gladly clapped and stomped along. And when it was time to take a tour of the rest of the grounds of the nutrition center, this little boy followed me, holding my hand. He never left my side. In fact, at one point, he was holding on to one hand, but he wanted to move to the other side. So what he did was, instead of letting go of this hand, he grabbed my other hand, kind of like we were about to play Ring Around the Rosie, before he would let go of the other. He was not willing to let go of one hand before he knew he had a hold of the other one. After we had spent almost the entire day this way, one of our Congolese hosts asked me if I knew his name. I told her that I didn't because I don't know how to ask him. And so she taught me to ask, "What's your name?" in Lingala. And so I bent down and asked this child who had been my shadow all day long, "Kombo nayo nani?" And he smiled broadly and said, "Dieu." Dieu, I learned, is the French word for God. As tears filled my eyes, I realized that God had been by my side all day. God refused to let go of me. God communicated with me through laughter and song. The ability to ask someone's name is powerful. Names are powerful. Names matter. They hold meaning. Names help us claim our identity. It's often the first thing we do when meeting someone, right? We ask, "What's your name?" Or we offer our own name. It happened to me several times when I came in this morning. It's a strange conversation, isn't it, when our names are not exchanged? When you walk away from a conversation and realize that you never got that person's name. That's strange. When reading this morning's scripture from Exodus, we might focus on the name of God, and we'll get to that. But we don't have to wait until the end of all of these verses to find meaning in names. In verse 4, when Moses turns to see this bush that has been set aflame, God calls Moses by name. God doesn't have to ask, "Hey, you out there, what's your name?" God already knows Moses. There's an intimacy in this interaction. There's a familiarity in this conversation. God isn't simply speaking to whoever might happen by. God is speaking to Moses. God is calling Moses by name. This man that God knows well enough to be on a first name basis. God isn't catching someone randomly walking on the path. God doesn't need to ask to whom God is speaking. Which really is good news for us, too. We may not experience God in a tree set on fire, but we follow a God who created us in their image. We follow a God who calls us God's own, who calls us child. But more than that, we follow a God that knows our name, who calls us by our name. God is not a stranger, and we are not strangers to God. And God calling Moses by name, God knowing us by name, goes deeper than just how we are addressed. It goes deeper into who we truly are. It encompasses our history, our ancestry, and our legacy of faith. God didn't need to ask Moses his name, but Moses needed to ask God, "What's your name? When people ask me who sent me, what do I tell them?" And God answers by giving a family tree of sorts. "I am the God of Abraham. I am the God of Isaac. I am the God of Jacob." And I think that could continue down through those who have set a faithful example, those who have taught us our faith. "I am the God of Ruth. I am the God of Jesse. I am the God of Mary. I am the God of Elizabeth and Zechariah." And maybe even closer to us, "I am the God of your great-grandmother Amelia and your grandmother Barbara. I am the God of your parents Jim and Rena." God is telling Moses, and God is telling us, that our identity is wrapped up in God. That you find your identity in your earthly family, of course, but you find your identity in the legacy of faith. Our names tell the story of who we are, where we have come from. When I was a teenager, when my sister or I would head out to hang out with our friends or go to a football or a basketball game or whatever we were doing that night, they would say, "Remember the family name." Growing up in a fairly small town, or it was a small town when I was growing up in it, it was quite probable that if I was misbehaving in public, it would get back to my parents before I did. I wonder if that's a little bit what God is saying to Moses. Remember the family name. Remember your legacy of faith. Remember who you are, but also remember whose you are. Remember that the legacy of faith goes before you. When you go out into the world, remember that God is with you. And remember the legacy of faith that follows. Let it give you strength. Let it give you comfort. Let it be a reminder that you have been called by name. You have been claimed as a child of God. When Moses asks God in the burning bush, "What is your name?" the answer comes as sort of a riddle. I am who I am. I am the God of your ancestors. God is telling Moses that who he is, who the Israelites are, is wrapped up in their devotion to God, in their legacy of faith. That they can find the strength to be set free, the strength to endure until they are led to the promised land because they have been named and they have been claimed by God. And when we face difficulty, when we must speak truth to power, when we must stand on the side of justice, we can stand firm knowing that we have been called by name, by God who gives us words to speak and the strength to stand firm. This is a story of call. It's a story that sets in motion the liberty of God's people. It's a story that begins an epic journey where Moses will boldly speak truth to power, will rise up to be a leader, will endure hardships, but will also be reminded of the faithfulness of God. And it all began with a name. It began with God calling Moses by name. It began with a reminder that God belongs to the family, or that Moses belongs to the family of God. This is a story that reminds us that God calls us by name too, and God calls us beloved. It's a reminder that God is the God of our ancestors and will show us the same faithfulness that God showed to them. It's a reminder that we too are part of God's family. So what's your name? Kombo Nayonani. Moses? Gia? Cheryl? Child of God? Called? Beloved? Amen.